Welcome back everyone to the part 2 of the ultimate photographic iceberg. This part 2 will be all about photos with unnerving backstories. So let's begin with the first entry, Mount St. Helens. Just 52 miles northeast of Portland, Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States, lies Mount St. Helens, a striking volcano explored by many for centuries. It holds significant meaning for the Cowlitz and Yakama tribes and stands tall at 8,360 feet. Many people have visited the mountain to capture its beauty in photographs, usually without issue. However, Mount St. Helens is more famously known for a much more catastrophic reason. On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted with the force of a hydrogen bomb, flattening forests and scorching 100 square miles of timberland. A photo taken by Robert Landsberg, a 48-year-old American photographer, shows a dark cloud rising above a row of trees. Landsberg had come to the mountain to document its splendor, but the ominous cloud in his photo was actually molten ash from the eruption, one of the most infamous natural disasters in U.S. history. Dormant for 123 years, the volcano erupted with a force that turned daylight to darkness, killing 57 people, destroying hundreds of homes, and damaging 185 miles of highway. The eruption, triggered by an earthquake, reduced the mountain's peak from 9,677 feet to 8,363 feet. Landsberg, realizing he wouldn't survive, heroically protected his photographic equipment by placing it in his backpack and laying on it to preserve the film for future researchers. Rest in peace to Robert Landsberg and all the others lost in the Mount St. Helens eruption. Photo before the tsunami. This next story illustrates how life can be altered in an instant through sheer randomness. It's about John and Jackie Mill, a couple from Vancouver, Canada, who tragically died when a tsunami hit the beach where they were vacationing in Thailand. This occurred on December 26, 2004, the day after Christmas. The photo you see here is the last one they took before being swept away. To fully grasp the gravity of this event, we need to talk about Christian P. Christian and his wife Nicole, missionaries from Washington State, heard about the devastating tsunami and traveled to Thailand with colleagues to offer help. They arrived about a month after the disaster, around January 26. While walking along the beach at Khao Lak, Christian's friend Cameron stumbled upon a smashed digital camera. Initially, it seemed insignificant, but when Christian removed the memory card and viewed the photos on his Palm Pilot, he discovered images capturing the moments just before the tsunami hit. Christian described it as if they had picked up a tape recorder and heard someone's last conversation abruptly ending. The photos unknowingly documented John and Jackie Mill's final moments. The Nils had visited Thailand several times, considering it their second home. During this trip, everything seemed normal. They even called their children on December 25th to wish them a Merry Christmas. On the morning of December 26th, they went to the beach with their digital camera, unaware of the impending disaster. They saw a large wave in the distance and began taking photos, not realizing the danger. The photos Christian found show the wave on the horizon, gradually getting closer until the final image, where the wave is dangerously near. Soon after, the couple was swept away. Their children, Patrick, David, and Christian, after losing contact with their parents, sent John's brother-in-law to Thailand to search for them. John's body was found on December 31, 2004, and Jackie's on January 13, 2005. Christian P's random discovery of the camera and his effort to return the photos to the family provided a bittersweet closure. Patrick, one of the couple's sons, said that although it was painful to look at the pictures, they brought some peace. He felt reassured that there was nothing his parents could have done to avoid the tsunami, and that they might have chosen to sit and enjoy the place they loved in their final moments. The Big Game. On November 29, 1900, the California Golden Bears and the Stanford Cardinals were set to face off in what was known as the Big Game. Across the street from the game's venue, the San Francisco and Pacific Glassworks Company had just opened a new factory. Despite its newness, only one furnace was operational, filled with 14 tons of molten glass, heated to a scorching 1,600 degrees Celsius. The Big Game attracted a large crowd, including many who couldn't afford or didn't want to pay the admission fee of $1, a significant sum equivalent to about $40 today. Desperate to watch the game, hundreds of people climbed onto the roof of the new glass factory, seeking a vantage point. The factory workers warned the police about the danger, as the roof's ventilator could not support the weight of so many people, but their warnings were ignored. Just 20 minutes after the game started, the roof collapsed. Around 100 people fell 4 stories to the factory floor, some dying instantly. Another 60 to 100 people fell onto the furnace, where the surface temperature of 260 degrees Celsius caused unimaginable suffering. Some fell through pipes, leading to hot oil spraying and igniting, burning people alive. In total, 23 lives were lost, most of them young males. This tragedy remains a somber reminder of the dangers of overcrowding and ignoring safety warnings. Budd Dwyer's last photo. Next up is this photo of Budd Dwyer, a man who, in an incredibly disturbing twist, took his own life on television on January 22, 1987. Burdened by a case of corruption and bribery, Dwyer shot himself on live TV. The photo shown was taken moments before he did that. Born and bred in Missouri, Budd Dwyer had been a rather accomplished politician before any allegations were leveled against him. He had risen from the position of the 6th District Representative in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in 1964 to holding the office of Pennsylvania Treasurer in 1984. His journey saw him get re-elected for some of the positions, and of course, his name grew bigger with each election cycle, thanks to his tenacious spirit and sheer commitment to public service. This, however, took a drastic turn for him in 1984, when it was revealed that public employees in Pennsylvania from 1979 to 1981 had overpaid millions of dollars in taxes following an error that had caused tax deductions even when employees were on sick leave. In a bid to fix the mess and recover up to $40 million in Social Security taxes, Dwyer hired Computer Technology Associates, CTA, a small data processing company operating in Newport Beach, California. CTA would get paid $4.6 million for the work. It was fishy, though, that such a big contract went to a firm with only 3 full-time employees, and the competitive bidding process wasn't done. This became the least of Dwyer's worries, because about 2 months later, on July 11th, he learned the FBI was looking into CTA for having bribed other public officials in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County to get similar contracts. He rescinded the CTA contract, but it was too late. His political opponent, General Al Benedict, who had been eyeing the treasurer position, obtained a sworn statement from Janice R. Kincaid, a former vice president at CTA, that implicated Dwyer. This meant rescinding the contract would do nothing to save him. The statement, widely circulated by Benedict, claimed that Dwyer received a kickback of $300,000 from CTA for the irregularly awarded contract. That's about $885,000 in today's money. Now, political smearing or not, these allegations were really damning to Dwyer's career. It also didn't help that his opponent, General Al Benedict, had gone to great lengths to find information that would make him look bad. For example, the same statement also read that Mrs. Kincaid had been asked by CTA, her employer, to do anything she needed to make any of their customers happy, which was taken to strongly indicate, at least according to her, a request to offer sexual favors to clients. These allegations were extensive, involving others beyond Dwyer, with a CTA employee even alleging that her boss had a secret Swiss bank account holding $400,000. Interestingly, as the investigations ensued, Dwyer termed the whole thing as a nightmare that just wouldn't go away. He then tried to frustrate the investigations, but the court eventually charged him with 11 counts of conspiracy, mail fraud, perjury, and interstate transportation in aid of racketeering. He faced 55 years in prison. Feeling cornered, Dwyer called for a press conference at the Pennsylvania State Capitol building in Harrisburg. As reported by the New York Times, red-faced and sweating, Dwyer drew a .357 Magnum revolver from a manila envelope, and before anyone could stop him, he put the barrel of the pistol in his mouth and pulled the trigger. He died about 30 minutes later. It was later discovered that, knowing he would end his life, he asked for a letter to be delivered to Robert P. Casey, the then Pennsylvania governor. The letter detailed his dissatisfaction with the justice system, saying it did not function properly, and also requested that his wife, Joan Dwyer, be appointed as the interim treasurer. Steelo King. For those who follow rap, the name capital Steez, also known as Steelo King, might ring a bell. Steez began rapping in 2008 at the age of 15 as part of a group called The Third Kind. A few years later, he co-founded the rap group Pro Era with record producer Powers Pleasant, which included several talented rappers, notably Joey Badass, who was a close friend of Steez. The duo created the song Survival Tactics, which has amassed 25 million views on YouTube. That same year, Steez released American Corruption, an acclaimed album that further elevated his profile. As his career soared, everything seemed promising for Steez. However, on December 23, 2012, he tweeted, "The end," before tragically jumping off the cinematic music group headquarters, ending his life. This final tweet was a chilling indication of his state of mind, but it was not the only unsettling post he had made. During high school, Steez delved into spiritual and metaphysical theories, embracing beliefs in Egyptian mysticism, numerology, astral projection, and the Indian chakra system. He considered himself an indigo child, believing he possessed supernatural abilities and existed on a higher dimensional plane. These beliefs and his tweets led some on Reddit to speculate that he might have had schizophrenia. One commenter noted the way Steez linked the number 47 with doomsday, and how he discussed these ideas with friends who didn't grasp the depth of his thoughts until it was too late. The signs of his distress were evident only in hindsight. Some believe Steez's actions stemmed from a mental imbalance or illness, drawing parallels to other experiences with schizophrenia. Others even suggest that his death might not have been self-inflicted. Regardless of the exact circumstances, the loss of Capital Steez was a profound tragedy. His talent and creativity brought joy to many, and his absence is deeply felt. May he rest in peace. Pat Tillman's last photo. The tragic story of Pat Tillman, a former NFL player turned soldier, reveals a complex web of alleged deceit and cover-ups by the U.S. government and media. Let's start with the photo. This image of Pat was taken shortly before April 22, 2004, in southeastern Afghanistan's Khost province. Pat, serving in the 75th Ranger Regiment, was on patrol with his unit. This picture became his last, as on April 22nd, he was killed by 3 close-range bullets to the head. Pat Tillman was a promising NFL player who left behind a $3.6 million contract with the Arizona Cardinals to enlist after the 9/11 attacks. His decision to join the military in 2002 was driven by a desire to fight against al-Qaeda and seek justice for Osama bin Laden. His story made headlines, and the Bush administration used his enlistment for pro-war propaganda, portraying him as a symbol of honor and sacrifice. When Pat was killed in 2004, the Army initially reported that he had died heroically, charging up a ridge under enemy fire to protect his fellow soldiers. His death was widely publicized, with helicopters flying over a stadium in his honor, his memorial broadcasted on live TV, and posthumous awards like the Silver Star and Purple Heart. However, the truth soon began to unravel. It was later revealed that Pat had been killed by friendly fire, not enemy action. This shocking revelation came after Army doctors noted that his wounds were suspicious due to their close proximity. The Army was forced to admit a month later that Pat had been killed by his fellow soldiers, not enemy forces. Disturbingly, as his comrades took aim, Pat reportedly shouted, "I'm Pat f***ing Tillman," trying to stop them. These were his last words. Pat's family endured a grueling journey to uncover the truth, facing 7 official investigations and 2 congressional hearings. Pat's mother, Mary Tillman, expressed her frustration, stating the Army had no regard for him as a person, exploiting his virtue and then abandoning him. Pat's brother, Kevin Tillman, who served in the same unit, testified before Congress that an alternative narrative was constructed to avoid public embarrassment. In a 2007 congressional hearing, Kevin summarized the family's ordeal, saying the deception was an insult to them and aimed to deceive the nation. Knowing all this, Pat Tillman's last photo carries profound depth, symbolizing not only his sacrifice, but also the tragic reality of his untimely death. Overworking is a common issue, whether it's for school or a job. While some people struggle to work consistently for a few hours, others can push themselves for days without rest. However, humans need sleep, and a lack of it leads to serious health issues, particularly exhaustion. Coffee and energy drinks can temporarily stave off fatigue, but overconsumption can have severe consequences. Mita Diran, an Indonesian copywriter, highlighted this problem in a tweet on December 14, 2013. Her heavy workload and excessive energy drink intake soon took a toll on her health. Her social media posts reveal the extent of her overwork, with comments about working over 12 hours a day at the office. Tragically, the relentless pace and reliance on energy drinks led to her untimely death. Following her passing, her company tweeted their condolences, sparking a backlash. The situation is a sobering reminder of the dangers of overworking and the lack of choice many people have in such circumstances. Rest in peace, Mita Diran. Stairway to Heaven. The Stairway to Heaven is an illegal hike in Oahu, Hawaii, consisting of 3,922 steps and typically taking 2 to 5 hours to complete. Its illegal status stems from funding and cost disputes, but this hasn't deterred many from sneaking in to experience the challenging yet rewarding trail. However, for Dalan Pua, this hike turned into a nightmare. On February 27, 2015, Dalan took a bus to hike the infamous trail, capturing photos and texting friends and family along the way. Initially, everything seemed fine, despite the risk of being charged with criminal trespassing, but by evening, Dalan was nowhere to be found. His family launched a search involving firefighters, which continued until March 3rd, when the efforts were officially called off. Undeterred, his family continued searching, analyzing his texts for clues. They discovered his final photo, which at first appeared normal. Upon closer inspection, however, they noticed a mysterious man crouching in the bushes behind Dalan. This led many, including his family, to suspect foul play. The man has never come forward, and Dalan remains missing to this day, 8 years later. Despite the eerie photo, not everyone believes foul play was involved. Reddit user DC Landry recounted hearing cries for help while hiking the same trail, prompting multiple 911 calls, but no one was found. Another Reddit user claimed the man in the photo was their friend who contacted the police and was simply passing by. It's also noted that a severe storm weeks before Dalan's hike had made the stairs even more dangerous. Regardless of the circumstances, Dalan Pua did not deserve to vanish this way. If he is alive, we can only hope he returns home. In the more likely event of his passing, may he rest in peace. Ayrton Senna's last photo. Ayrton Senna is one of the most revered figures in Formula One, his legacy enduring from the 90s to today. This image, taken just moments before his fatal crash, holds a profound significance. Research reveals that despite the accolades of modern heavyweights like Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher, many F1 fans still consider Senna the greatest driver ever due to his unmatched skills and daring maneuvers. Senna's reputation for ruthless and risky maneuvers on the Grand Prix circuit made him stand out even among the fastest drivers. His talent saw him quickly ascend the ranks, earning 41 Grand Prix titles and 3 World Championships in 1988, 1990, and 1991. Hailing from São Paulo, Brazil, Senna set multiple records, including being one of only 3 Brazilian drivers to win the World Championship. Notably, his record for the most pole positions remained unbroken for 17 years, from 1989 to 2006. A pole position, achieved by setting the fastest speed during qualifying trials, grants the most advantageous starting point in a race, showcasing Senna's incredible speed. However, Senna's exceptional speed ultimately contributed to his tragic demise. On May 1, 1994, during the San Marino Grand Prix at the Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari in Italy, Senna crashed into a concrete barrier while leading the race. The crash occurred on the 7th lap at the Tamburello corner, where his car veered off the racing line and struck the unprotected barrier. Data from the wreckage showed Senna was traveling at 190 miles per hour before the corner. He braked hard, shifting down twice, but still hit the wall at 130 miles per hour. The impact tore off the right front wheel and the nose cone. Tragically, the wheel struck his helmet, causing fatal head trauma as part of the suspension assembly penetrated his helmet. Despite immediate medical attention, including efforts by Sid Watkins, head of the on-track medical team, Senna succumbed to his injuries. Watkins recalled, "We lifted him from the cockpit and laid him on the ground. As we did, he sighed, and although I'm not religious, I felt his spirit depart at that moment. Investigations later attributed the accident to a hastily adapted steering column. Senna's tragic death led to significant safety reforms in Formula One, including changes to speed regulations, track layouts, runoff areas, and crash tests. Understanding this context makes Senna's last photo even more poignant. It serves as a reminder of his incredible talent, the risks of the sport, and the lasting impact of his untimely death on driver safety standards. Andrew McAuley. The Tasman Sea, a vast 2,000-kilometer expanse of water between Australia and New Zealand, has seen many travelers cross its treacherous waters, but none had attempted the journey by kayak until Andrew McAuley. In January 2007, Andrew, an experienced sea kayaker with numerous expeditions under his belt, set off on his second attempt to conquer the Tasman Sea by kayak. His previous try had been abandoned, but his determination remained unwavering. Over the next month, he braved the challenging conditions of the sea, capturing photos to document his journey. One of these photos, featuring him covered in sunscreen, may seem eerie, but it likely captured him in good spirits, despite the daunting task ahead. Throughout his voyage, Andrew faced severe weather conditions that often capsized his kayak, forcing him to right it repeatedly. His resilience and skill kept him going as he inched closer to his destination. It seemed he was on track to accomplish what many deemed impossible. However, in February 2007, just 34 miles from his goal, Andrew sent out a distress call, realizing he couldn't reach his destination. A search operation was launched, but after days of searching, only his partially flooded kayak was found. Andrew's body was never recovered, leaving his fate a mystery. Though he likely perished, it's widely believed that he did indeed kayak across the Tasman Sea. May he rest in peace. Garrett Miller. Garrett Miller's final moments were captured in two photos that now hold a heartbreaking significance. His father, Dave Mills, expressed his grief to the press, saying he felt an immense sense of loss, as if something precious had been taken from him. Garrett, just 15 years old, died on May 12, 2017, at King Street Park in Napanee, Ontario, Canada, after a tragic and preventable accident. Earlier that day, Garrett had left school and was spending time at the park with his girlfriend and best friend. In the photos taken just 10 minutes before the accident, Garrett is smiling, his mood captured in the images. In one picture, a faint dandelion can be seen tucked behind his ear, and in another, he's flexing his muscles for the camera. According to his girlfriend, Garrett had even described it as the best day of his life. The trio was passing time at the park before Garrett's first official date with his girlfriend, a movie night they were all looking forward to. But tragically, Garrett's life was cut short when a soccer goalpost fell on him, killing him instantly. While trying to impress his girlfriend, Garrett had begun doing chin-ups on the goalpost's crossbar. The structure, an older model with most of its weight concentrated at the top, wasn't anchored down and tipped over, striking him on the head. Dave Mills, devastated by the loss of his son, emphasized how needless the accident was, stating that the park's risks were completely unexpected. The goalpost, weighing between 180 and 200 pounds, was immediately replaced with one that was properly anchored. However, this didn't stop Garrett's father from seeking justice. He vowed to find out who was responsible, whether it was due to budget cuts, neglect, or simple oversight. Mills' determination mirrors that of other grieving parents who have fought for change. In 2003, after a similar incident in which a 184-pound goalpost fell and killed 6-year-old Zachary Tran, Zach's parents successfully pushed for Zach's Law in Illinois. This law mandates that all goalposts in the state be securely anchored or designed to prevent tipping. Knowing that Garrett's life ended just 10 minutes after those joyful photos were taken adds an unsettling weight to the story. DC-10 crash. In the United States, there are around 45,000 domestic flights every day. Despite this vast number, airplane crashes and catastrophic accidents are exceedingly rare. In 2021, there were only 176 air traffic fatalities worldwide, making it uncommon to perish in a plane accident, especially on a commercial flight. However, uncommon doesn't mean impossible. A United Airlines DC-10 carrying 293 people crashed while attempting an emergency landing in Sioux City, Iowa. Astonishingly, 184 people survived. The incident left many asking why the plane crashed in the first place. During a routine flight from Denver to Chicago, the DC-10 made a shallow right turn, something it had done thousands of times. However, this time was different due to a microscopic flaw in the titanium alloy fan disc, which had developed into a significant crack over the years. During the turn, the fan disc disintegrated, causing extensive damage to the aircraft, including the number 2 hydraulic system and supply hoses, making the plane nearly impossible to control. Despite this, the crew, including Alfred Haynes, Bill Records, Dudley Vorak, and Dennis Fitch, didn't give up. After experimenting, they discovered they could somewhat control the plane by idling the left wing-mounted engine and applying maximum power to the right one, allowing them to level the aircraft. The plane entered phugoid cycles, a phenomenon where it would repeatedly climb and descend, losing about 1,500 feet of altitude with each cycle. Dennis Fitch managed to use the throttles to mitigate this cycle. As they approached Sioux Gateway Airport, they were traveling at around 250 miles per hour, much faster than the speed required for a safe landing. The aircraft began to roll to the right, and the engines couldn't respond quickly enough to Fitch's commands to stop the roll. The plane hit the ground, flipped, and rolled over, finally coming to rest in a nearby cornfield. In the end, 112 out of the 292 people on board lost their lives. Despite the horrendous conditions, the crew's efforts saved the majority of the passengers, a remarkable feat under such dire circumstances. Survivors will forever remember the peaceful countryside marred by this tragic disaster. Buddy Holly. Charles Hardin Buddy Holly was a seminal figure in 1950s rock and roll, collaborating with other icons like Elvis Presley. Born into a musically inclined family, Buddy began his journey with the violin, often performing in local talent shows with his brothers. His musical inspirations included Hank Snow, Bob Wills, and Hank Williams. In elementary school, Buddy met Bob Montgomery, with whom he would later form a musical partnership. After high school, Buddy pursued music full-time, drawing significant inspiration from seeing Elvis perform live in Lubbock, Texas in 1955. Later, he even opened a show for Elvis himself. Among his many hit songs, That'll Be the Day, Not Fade Away, and Rave On stand out as fan favorites. Buddy's influence was so profound that Rolling Stone magazine ranked him 13th on their list of the top 100 artists of all time. On February 2, 1959, Buddy Holly was performing at the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa, as part of his winter dance party tour. To avoid a grueling bus ride and get some rest, he and his band decided to charter a Beechcraft Bonanza airplane to their next venue. Unfortunately, the pilot, Roger Peterson, was not fully qualified to fly by instruments alone, which meant he needed clear visibility to navigate properly. The weather that night was far from clear, with a snowstorm making visibility difficult. Tragically, in the early hours of February 3, 1959, the plane crashed into a cornfield 5 miles northwest of Mason City, Iowa, killing everyone on board. The other victims of the crash were fellow musicians Richie Valens, J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson, and pilot Roger Peterson. This devastating event marked a significant loss in the music world, often referred to as the day the music died. Buddy Holly's legacy, however, continues to live on, influencing countless artists and delighting fans with his timeless music. Titanic. This image is one many of you are likely familiar with. To give you some context, I'll take you back over 100 years to 1909, when the construction of the Titanic began. During the 26-month building process, over 200 injuries were incurred by workers, and 6 people died during construction. Definitely not a good omen for what would come in the future. When it was finished, the Titanic boasted features like a saltwater pool, a gymnasium, and even a Victorian-style Turkish bath. The allegedly unsinkable Titanic was finally launched for the first time on May 31, 1911, at 12:12 p.m. Almost 1 year later, on April 10, 1912, the ship left on its maiden voyage with 920 passengers aboard, not including the crew. It narrowly avoided a collision with the SS City of New York and the Oceanic, and then successfully made its way across the Atlantic to Cherbourg, France. There it picked up 274 passengers and let off 24. They then headed to Ireland, arriving at Cork Harbour on April 11th, picking up 123 more passengers and letting off 7. One of the passengers that disembarked the voyage, Kate Odell, took the photo you saw earlier. On April 13th, the Titanic began to head back across the Atlantic to return to New York by April 17. During this time, a fire was noticed on the ship that had apparently been burning for some time, which wasn't uncommon for steamships at the time. According to Wikipedia, this was due to the spontaneous combustion of the coal used to fuel the ships. As they continued their journey, the Titanic received several warnings from other ships about drifting ice, but these were ignored by Captain Edward John Smith, as such warnings were typically taken as advisories. On top of this, no vessel had ever been capsized by ice before, and any head-on collisions that did happen hadn't ended in tragedy. Unfortunately, at 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, an iceberg was spotted ahead of the Titanic, which was moving at full speed. Although the first officer of the ship, William Murdoch, attempted to instruct the ship to avoid the iceberg, it was already too late. After slamming into the iceberg on the starboard side, the hull of the ship was dented in such a way that the structural integrity was compromised, allowing water to rush through the formerly watertight compartments. Out of the 2,223 people on the ship, only half could be put on lifeboats, as the ship was considered virtually unsinkable, and therefore didn't have enough lifeboats for everyone. Women and children were rushed onto the lifeboats first, which drastically helped the survival rate of those groups. By 2:20 a.m., the ship was on its way to the depths of the ocean. In the darkness and water that was below freezing temperature, many people struggled to survive. Of those in the water, only 5 were helped into the lifeboats, despite there being a capacity for 500 more people. It took until 4 a.m. for another boat to arrive on the scene, the RMS Carpathia. After everything was said and done, 1,517 people died, with only 706 making it back to New York. Rest in peace to everyone lost in this tragedy. The Kursk. On August 12, 2000, the Russian Navy submarine Kursk participated in a naval exercise in the Barents Sea. This massive submarine, with 9 compartments capable of holding over 100 people, was considered unsinkable and reportedly able to withstand a direct torpedo hit. During the exercise, the Kursk was to launch 2 dummy torpedoes at a battlecruiser. At 11:29, the crew loaded the first torpedo, immediately followed by seismic detectors recording an event measuring 1.5 on the Richter scale. Initially, this was thought to be part of the exercise, and though one crew reported it, the warning was ignored. Just 2 minutes and 14 seconds later, a second, much larger explosion measuring 4.2 on the Richter scale occurred. This explosion, equivalent to 2 to 3 tons of TNT, was so powerful it sank the submarine 354 feet to the seafloor before it detonated, showing the initial explosion's deadly force. Initial rescue efforts were unsuccessful, with the Kursk not being discovered until August 14th. The Navy downplayed the incident, with some officials claiming the exercise was successful and others citing minor technical difficulties. Bad weather further hampered rescue operations for 2 days, and there were several failed attempts to attach a diving bell to the sub and a rescue vessel to an escape hatch. Despite offers from other countries, international assistance was refused until 5 days after the incident, when help from the British and Norwegian governments was finally accepted. It took until August 21st, 9 days after the incident, for the Russian government to officially declare the entire crew of 118 people deceased. The first explosion was caused by a torpedo malfunction, but due to the Kursk's structural integrity, the submarine only sustained damage and fire in certain areas without being punctured. The crew initiated safety protocols, sealing pressurized doors to prevent flooding while trying to surface. However, the fire ignited other torpedoes, leading to the second, larger explosion, killing everyone in the front half of the sub. Only 23 people survived the initial explosions, including Lieutenant Captain Dmitry Kolesnikov, who was proud of his assignment on the Kursk. During their struggle for survival, Kolesnikov wrote 2 letters detailing the situation. The first letter mentioned the survivors moving to the submarine's 9th section and their inability to surface. The power soon failed, causing the temperature to drop and water to pool in the sub. Kolesnikov and the remaining 22 survivors passed away. Darsh Patel's last photo. On Sunday, September 21, 2014, Darsh Patel, a Rutgers University student, and 4 of his friends went hiking at the Apshawa Preserve in West Milford, New Jersey. They were carrying granola bars and water, ready for a typical hiking day. However, their hike turned into a tragic encounter with a black bear, which ultimately resulted in Darsh Patel's death. The 22-year-old was attacked and killed by the bear, making this event highly unusual, according to authorities. Just moments before the fatal attack, Patel managed to snap several photos of the 300-pound black bear from about 100 feet. The bear appeared to be getting closer in each of the 5 photos he took. Shortly after the last picture, the bear began to chase the group. They ran in different directions, but unfortunately the bear focused on Patel. According to a police statement from Timothy Storbeck, the town's chief of police, the group tried to flee when they realized the bear was following them. They got separated in the chaos, and when they regrouped, they discovered Patel was missing. They immediately called the police. A search ensued, and 2 hours later, Patel's body was found with numerous bite and claw marks. Even Patel's phone, which contained the last photos he took, bore fang marks. The search team, including the West Milford Police and the Environmental Protection Department, also found the bear nearby. Interestingly, the bear displayed stalking behavior and showed no interest in food. It stayed about 30 yards from Patel's body, circling the area until officers scared it away. The police decided to euthanize the bear, and a necropsy revealed it had ingested human tissue, clothing, and blood, with blood on its paws. Patel's death was the first bear-related fatality in New Jersey, although this specific bear had been spotted by locals searching for food just hours before the attack. Bob Considine, the spokesman for the Department of Environmental Protection, mentioned that black bear sightings in New Jersey are common and usually pose no threat to humans, as bears typically retreat when confronted. This might explain why Patel and his friends initially felt they could scare the bear away. However, this particular bear exhibited stalking and predatory behavior, making it an exception. Authorities confirmed that Patel and his friends did not provoke the bear, possibly only attracting its attention by taking photos. Lawrence Heine, an expert, advised that in a bear encounter, one should remain calm, not run, ensure the bear has an escape route, avoid direct eye contact, back up slowly, and speak in a low but assertive voice. However, he acknowledged that following this advice is easier said than done. Flight 17. In July 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, a Boeing 777, faced a tragic fate. The plane was shot down by a Russian-made surface-to-air missile while on its 11.5-hour journey from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This disaster sparked global outrage, with many suspecting a politically motivated attack. Despite Russia being blamed, the country denied any involvement. Investigations continued for years, with some allegations pointing towards possible involvement by President Putin. Now let's focus on the poignant photograph associated with this tragedy. Taken by a father named Dave Holly, this photo shows his wife Kim and their 4-year-old daughter Megan shortly after boarding the doomed flight. The family was en route to their dream vacation in Malaysia. Unbeknownst to Dave, this would be the last photograph he ever took. The photo has since become a cherished memento for their grieving relatives, who find solace in the fact that the family was happy and together in their final moments. Kim's sister, Monique, shared with CNN how the family treasures this last image, even though the entire report is heart-wrenching. Seeing Kim's father express his grief and anger, blaming the individual who launched the missile, is deeply moving. The investigation into the incident led to the prosecution of Igor Gherkin, a military officer, Sergei Dubinsky, an intelligence officer, and Leonid Karchenko, a military commander. All were found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment in November 2022. Despite strong indications that President Putin might have approved the missile launch, the evidence was insufficient, and the investigation concluded in February 2023, much to the disappointment of the Netherlands. Prime Minister Mark Rutte vowed to continue holding the Russian Federation accountable for its role in this tragedy. Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail spans over 2,190 miles from Georgia to Maine, attracting thousands of hikers each year. Since its inception in 1936, more than 20,000 people have completed this rigorous and popular trail. Among those drawn to its challenge was 66-year-old Jerry Largay, who began her hike on April 13, 2013, with her husband and friend, Jane Lee. Jerry's husband provided supplies while Jane accompanied her on the hike. The trio covered over 1,000 miles in a few months, with everything going smoothly. However, Jane had to leave the hike due to a family emergency, and Jerry decided to continue alone, with her husband meeting her more frequently along the way. Fellow hikers often assisted Jerry, and a photo taken of her during this time would later become infamous. While heading towards the Route 27 crossing, Jerry suddenly disappeared. Although over 1,200 people go missing on the trail annually, only 200 have been recorded as deceased in nearly 90 years, with most being found within a day or two. Jerry's case was different, as search teams combed the area daily without success, and the official search was eventually called off, although authorities continued investigating, suspecting foul play given her experience as a hiker. 2 years later, on October 14, 2015, a contractor conducting a mandatory forestry survey on Navy land discovered an abandoned campsite with personal items. Inside a tent, he found a sleeping bag that still felt occupied, and upon inspection, he found Jerry's skull. Strangely, the campsite was within the perimeter of the search area, and had even been reported to be only 100 feet from search teams at one point. Jerry's phone provided answers. She had sent texts to her husband, stating she was lost after leaving the trail to go to the bathroom, but poor service prevented them from sending. Another message the next day informed him she had wandered further off track and requested he call the police for help. Jane mentioned that Jerry could become disoriented under the strain of the hike, likely leading her to accidentally walk deeper into the woods. Jerry left several journal entries detailing her survival efforts, struggles, and attempts to find her way. Her final notes were directed to her family, instructing whoever found her body to inform her husband and daughter for closure. Rest in peace, Jerry Largay. Utah's slot canyons and flash floods. Utah, famous for its towering mountains and stunning canyons, attracts millions of visitors to its national parks each year. While exploring these natural wonders is usually safe, there are inherent dangers, one of which is more deadly than lightning, tornadoes, and hurricanes: flash floods. These floods can occur suddenly and are particularly hazardous in Utah's slot canyons, where water can rush through at high speeds. Despite the risks, many people still enjoy hiking in these slot canyons. This leads us to a tragic story captured in an image from November 18, 2015. The photo shows a group of hikers: Mark McKenzie, Linda Arthur, Steve Arthur, Gary Favila, Muku Reynolds, Robin Brum, and Don Tyner, smiling as they prepare to enter a slot canyon in Zion National Park. Zion is so popular that it sees over 5 million visitors each year, all eager to marvel at its natural beauty. The hikers were headed to Keyhole Canyon, a slot canyon known for its breathtaking but challenging terrain. For some adventurers, like those who practice canyoning, slot canyons are a source of enjoyment. However, these canyons can become death traps during flash floods. Tragically, this image would be the last taken of the group. All 7 hikers perished in a flash flood that swept through Keyhole Canyon after a heavy rainstorm hit the area in Hilldale, Utah, and Colorado City, Arizona. The severity of the storm made it impossible for rangers to reach the hikers in time. The same flash flood claimed the lives of 12 other people, including 9 children, making it an absolutely horrific event. On August 12, 1985, Japan Airlines Flight 123 departed Tokyo at 6:12 p.m. Just 12 minutes into the flight, the aircraft experienced rapid decompression, which severed all 4 hydraulic lines, detached the vertical stabilizer, and damaged other critical components. The pilots struggled to control the plane, but their efforts were in vain as the aircraft gradually became uncontrollable. Despite their valiant attempts to manage the situation for over 30 minutes, the plane ultimately crashed at around 6:56 p.m. The aircraft hit multiple locations and flipped over before coming to a halt in a state forest in Gunma Prefecture. Although the nearby Yokota Air Base was informed about the crash 20 minutes after it happened, the Japanese government never requested their assistance, even though they had a helicopter ready to deploy. It wasn't until after nightfall that another helicopter spotted the wreckage, and rescue teams only arrived the following morning. Out of the 524 people on board, only 4 survived. One of the survivors, Yumi Ochiai, recalled hearing other survivors making noise, but these sounds faded as the night went on. It is believed that more lives could have been saved if rescue efforts had not been delayed. During the investigation of the wreckage, a haunting image was found, showing passengers presumably putting on their oxygen masks as the plane decompressed. Rest in peace to all those who lost their lives. On December 26, 2004, a chilling photo captured a wave engulfing the land, towering over palm trees. This wasn't just any wave, it was part of one of the most catastrophic natural disasters in modern history. A powerful 9.1 magnitude seaquake struck off the coast of Sumatra Island, creating a 900-mile fault line where the Indian and Australian tectonic plates meet. The seafloor was thrust upward by as much as 40 meters, 131 feet, triggering a colossal tsunami. The massive waves soon slammed into Indonesia, devastating the island of Aceh and claiming the lives of 100,000 people. The tsunami's destruction didn't stop there. It continued to ravage Thailand, India, Sri Lanka, and even reached as far as South Africa. By the time the waves receded, 230,000 lives had been lost. This haunting photo leaves us wondering about the fate of those captured in the moment, likely caught off guard and unable to escape. Most of them probably didn't survive, given the staggering death toll. They were likely going about their daily lives, unaware of the impending catastrophe that would plunge them into unimaginable peril. Rest in peace to all those who perished, and heartfelt condolences to those affected by this tragic event. Vicki Weaver's last photo. Vicki died from a gunshot in August 1992 at her family's cabin in Ruby Ridge, Idaho. This happened when an FBI sniper, Lon Horiuchi, during a standoff with Vicki's husband Randy Weaver, fired a shot aimed at Kevin Harris, Randy's friend, only for it to end up hitting and killing Vicki. As argued in court by Jerry Spence, the Weavers' attorney, the sniper didn't need to fire the shots because, first, firing at an armed adult without warning them to surrender is unconstitutional. Second, the shots were fired while Randy and Kevin, the primary targets, were in retreat. And third, the sniper placed Vicki and her children at risk by firing at the cabin door without knowing who was behind it. As a matter of fact, the court upheld these charges, leading to the U.S. government incurring hefty fines. Randy and his 3 daughters were awarded $3.1 million despite the tragic loss of Sammy, their teenage son, and Vicki. Just an insert here. Sammy, aged 14, had actually been shot after allegedly firing at FBI agents who had killed the family's dog that had charged at them. It would later be highly contested as to who actually fired first. Anyway, moving on. Kevin was also awarded compensation, receiving $380,000, though this was in part to encourage him to drop the $10 million lawsuit he had mounted against the government. What's really unhinged about this whole case is that it all started with a refusal by Randy to show up for a court hearing where he had been accused by ATF agents of making and keeping illegal weapons. Apparently, he had missed a court hearing in February 1991 and also in March of that same year. So the entire incident was set in motion due to not showing up to court, escalating to a disturbing shootout that led to multiple deaths. It also didn't help that Randy had been a self-proclaimed white separatist and religious fundamentalist who didn't trust the government at all. In fact, the entire reason he was living in a cabin with no electricity or running water was to seclude himself from what he saw as corrupt civilization. His religious beliefs also made him believe that the world was coming to an end. The standoff might have continued if it weren't for civilian negotiator Bo Gritz, who convinced Randy to let Vicki's body be taken out of the cabin, for the critically injured Kevin to get medical help. Ebola Outbreak in 1976. Many of us are all too familiar with the uncertainty and fear that comes with a disease outbreak. One particularly infamous virus is Ebola, remembered by most for the outbreak in West Africa from 2013 to 2016. However, to understand the origins of this deadly virus, we need to go back to 1976, when the first outbreak occurred in what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The outbreak began in Yambuku, a village in northern Congo. Patient zero was Mabalo Lokela, a school headmaster who had returned to the village after a tour with the Yambuku mission in August, which included a trip along the Ebola River. Initially, Lokela's illness was thought to be malaria, and he was treated with quinine, a common malaria medication. He was first admitted to the Yambuku Mission Hospital on September 1st with a high fever, but was sent home to rest. By September 5th, his condition had deteriorated significantly, presenting symptoms such as profuse bleeding, vomiting, acute diarrhea, chest pains, headache, fever, agitation, and confusion. Sadly, Lokela passed away on September 8th. After Lokela's death, more people who had been at the mission hospital began to fall ill. The World Health Organization noted that nearly all subsequent infections were among those who had received injections at the hospital or had close contact with another case. Tragically, of the friends and relatives who prepared Lokela's body for burial, 21 fell ill, and 18 of them died. The remote mission hospital lacked the necessary equipment to diagnose this new disease, and as the number of cases increased, the Minister of Health sent out an international commission to investigate. The first doctor to arrive reported that none of the treatments being used on the patients were effective. This marked the first official description of the disease. The International Commission team, in an effort to understand how the disease was spreading, asked the nurses to survey the patients and gather basic information. They created a control group to compare against other Ebola patients, desperate to find a solution as the virus continued to spread. To limit the spread, authorities began to quarantine the most affected areas, despite some resistance from the local population. It was later discovered that the virus had spread through the hospital because nurses were giving pregnant women vitamin injections without properly sterilizing the needles, washing them in warm water between uses, and boiling them only at the end of the day. In the end, 318 cases were identified with 280 fatalities and 88% mortality rate. Another unrelated outbreak resulted in 284 cases and 151 deaths, a 53% mortality rate. The majority of the original mission hospital staff died, and several visiting nurses also succumbed to the virus. One such nurse was Mainga Nseka, who contracted the virus while treating a nun named Sister Farina. Nseka died while trying to return to Belgium for a formal diagnosis. This image shows two nurses standing beside Mainga as she is treated for the virus. She was only 22 years old and had planned to study advanced nursing in America on a scholarship. Rest in peace to Mainga and all those who lost their lives in this outbreak. The tragic crash of Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 182. On September 25, 1978, Flight 182 departed Sacramento for San Diego, with a stop in Los Angeles. According to Wikipedia, the crew consisted of Captain James E. Jim McFerrin, First Officer Robert E. Bob Fox, Flight Engineer Martin J. Wayne, and 4 flight attendants, each with over 10,000 hours of flying experience. At 8:34 a.m., the flight left Los Angeles with First Officer Fox piloting. The plane carried 128 people, including 29 employees of Pacific Southwest Airlines. 25 minutes into the flight, the crew was alerted by the approach controller about a nearby Cessna 172 aircraft, piloted by Martin Casey Jr. and David Boswell. Casey held multiple flight ratings and a commercial certificate, while Boswell was training under Casey to obtain his instrument rating. The PSA pilots initially reported seeing the Cessna, but soon lost sight of it. Less than a minute later, Flight 182 received permission to land. The pilots mistakenly believed the Cessna was behind them, but it was actually directly in front of them, too low to be visible and blending with the houses below. At 9 a.m., Flight 182 collided with the Cessna at 2,600 feet. Witnesses on the ground heard a loud metallic crunch, followed by an explosion, and saw the PSA plane descending. A photo of Flight 182 falling to the ground was captured by Hans Wendt, and Steve Howell recorded a video of the Cessna post-crash. The collision heavily damaged Flight 182's right wing, making the plane uncontrollable. Cockpit transcriptions reveal the crew's realization of the collision and their acceptance of the inevitable crash, with an unknown crew member saying, "Ma, I love you," moments before impact. Flight 182 ultimately crashed into a house, a driveway, and then exploded north of I-805, with one wing lodging into another house. 60% of San Diego's fire department was dispatched to the scene. The Cessna crashed at a different intersection. In total, 144 people died, including all crew members and passengers on both planes, and 7 residents on the ground. This remains the deadliest aviation disaster in California history and the 6th deadliest in U.S. history. Rest in peace to all who lost their lives in this tragic accident. Mitsuharu Misawa. Mitsuharu Misawa is highly regarded as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. As a child, Mitsuharu was a huge fan of pro wrestling, with his favorites being German pro wrestler Horst Hoffmann and Japanese pro wrestler Tomomi Jumbo Tsuruta. By age 12, he wanted to pursue a career in pro wrestling. Initially, he wanted to go pro after completing junior high, but his mother and teacher convinced him to focus on his studies so he could attend a school with a good wrestling program. In his second year of high school, Mitsuharu again wanted to drop out to pursue wrestling. One of his idols, Jumbo Tsuruta, advised him to complete all of high school and focus on amateur wrestling if he really wanted to go pro. Following this advice, Mitsuharu wrestled in school and won the National High School Championship in 1980. He also placed 5th at the Freestyle World Championships that same year. Despite his success in amateur wrestling, Mitsuharu actually disliked it. He made his professional debut a year later and led an illustrious pro wrestling career. He was an 8-time world champion, an 8-time world tag team champion, and held the All Japan Pro Wrestling Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship for the longest period in that title's history. Due to business disagreements, Mitsuharu eventually left All Japan Pro Wrestling in 2000 and formed a wrestling league called Pro Wrestling Noah. This league was successful for the first 5 years, but as their top star, Kenta Kobashi, had to leave for cancer treatment in 2006, Mitsuharu realized he would have to work a full-time wrestling schedule to maintain attention, despite his many injuries. On June 13, 2009, Mitsuharu participated in the GHC Tag Team Championships with Go Shiozaki against Akitoshi Saito and Bison Smith. 27 minutes into the match, Mitsuharu took a belly-to-back suplex from Saito. After the suplex, Mitsuharu lay motionless. A doctor in attendance rushed in and attempted CPR to no avail. Paramedics then attempted to use a defibrillator, also to no avail. Mitsuharu was later pronounced dead at age 46, with the cause of death being atlantoaxial dislocation. Japanese sports publications covered this event heavily. However, mainstream news barely reported on the matter. His private funeral had 100 people in attendance, many of them wrestlers. Rest in peace, Mitsuharu Misawa. Sophie Lionnet. This image shows Sophie Lionnet, who looks emaciated and distraught. Over a year before this, she had moved from a rural area northeast of Paris to London to work as a nanny for a couple named Sabrina Cuider and Wissem Medouni. This move turned out to be a horrific mistake, as the couple, especially Sabrina, were extremely abusive. Sabrina had a history of obsessive and volatile behavior, including harassing ex-partners and physical assault. One of her exes was Mark Walton, a founding member of the Irish boy band Boyzone and a successful figure in the music industry. Sabrina was particularly obsessed with Mark and felt that he had stolen her chance at a luxurious life. After he left her and moved to Los Angeles, Sabrina became consumed by delusions and paranoia. When Sophie Lionnet responded to Sabrina's ad for a nanny position, she unknowingly walked into a nightmare. Sabrina, convinced that Sophie was involved with Mark and was spying on her, subjected Sophie to relentless abuse. Sabrina recorded numerous videos in which she, along with Wissem, tried to force Sophie to confess to these baseless accusations. They threatened her with imprisonment and even dragged her to the police. But for some reason, authorities failed to recognize Sophie's desperate situation. Unable to escape and without the means to return to France, Sophie reached out to her mother, expressing her unhappiness. Her mother promptly booked a flight for her to return to Paris, but Sophie never made it. Despite her deteriorating condition, she was denied medical treatment. On September 20th, 2017, neighbors reported a foul smell coming from a bonfire in Sabrina and Uisam's backyard. When firefighters arrived, they found Uisam grilling chicken, but the smell persisted. Upon extinguishing the bonfire, they discovered charred human remains, including fingers and a nose. Uisam tried to claim the remains were from a lamb carcass, but this was quickly disproven. The couple was arrested, and an investigation revealed the extent of Sophie's suffering. Her personal belongings, including the plane ticket her mother bought, were confiscated. She endured physical abuse, starvation, confinement in a dark room, and relentless interrogations until she made a false confession. Tragically, her life was taken in the couple's bathtub. Sabrina Kuiter and Wissam Madouni were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years.